G'day, my name's Michael, and honestly, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about how much plastic waste humans create and discard every day. And not only that, but I'm devastated by the knowledge of where we keep extracting these raw materials from, which is why my professional research project is focused on changing the way in which people think about and deal with plastic waste. Firstly, I'm going to catch you up with a quick summary of our history with plastic waste and how our current system is dealing with it, or trying to. I'm going to point out the system's flaws and present you with an idea for a solution, and more importantly, why I believe that this solution shows promise. And not just for one narrow context, but how it can be adapted to suit a massive range of people within a broad spectrum of contexts. I'll also give you a peek at the highlights reel of my creative process, which will culminate in a series of rendered images showing off the aesthetics of the system I've designed. But first off, my goals for this project. I aim to breathe new life in the form of innovation into the waste management system that you and I have been unlucky enough to have inherited. I say unlucky because at its root, it's fundamentally flawed. The good news is, I believe that we can rewrite this base error through the education and empowerment of everyday people like you and I. But before I get into it, a bit of backstory. We first discovered how to mass-produce plastic waste back in the 1950s. It immediately opened up the world to a million new possibilities. It really did transform industries. Medical applications and food storage in particular were a couple of its major positive impact areas. And everything from space exploration to beer pong was made possible, at least in part, by plastic. Which is exactly why this graph looks the way it does. It tracks the total accumulated amount of plastic produced from 1950 to 2015. And as you can see, it's speeding up. It took us 50 years to make the first 3 billion tonnes, but only about 10 years to double that. Thankfully, our rates of recycling are also speeding up. Which is good, right? Well, yes, but also no. See, for the first 30 years of production, no one really seemed to give a toss about where our plastic waste ended up. If you'll notice, this graph showing how plastic waste has been disposed of only begins in 1980. Before then, it all went to landfill, or environments like the ocean. It took almost another whole decade of frivolous consumption before recycling came into the picture. And without the help of Facebook or TikTok, it took a while to catch on. We recycle about 20% of the plastic waste we create today. But is that 20% really helping us in the long run? This graph highlights the enormity of the problem. It represents all of the plastic that has ever been created, from its initial creation to now. That little green loop at the bottom, that's the total amount that we've recycled and are still using right now. Because thanks to mechanical recycling processes, we can reuse some plastics, some of the time, for a little while, before burying them like we do everything else anyway. Notice something wrong? Yeah, it's this graph. It's a line. By definition, linear processes require infinite inputs to sustain their existence. Only trouble is, we live in a finite world. We run out of stuff. It happens all the time. From species extinction to the last Tim Tam in the fridge, we have unlimited nothing. The solution? Recycling. I know what you're thinking. You just said recycling doesn't work. Hear me out. I mean recycling by the very definition of the word. Recycle. Meaning to put something through a cycle, aka circle, again and again. What the industry currently calls recycling is a linear process. They're merely reusing material a couple of times at best until it's poor quality. Then it goes to the magical hole in the ground where it's out of sight, out of mind. By no means the recycling industry the bad guys here. They're really trying. They're just clearly limited by their technology. Enter chemical recycling, the first true recycling process for plastics. Mechanical recycling basically melts plastic into a semi-toxic contaminated goo that is way less impressive when we try to reform it into new products. Chemical recycling takes this a step further. By breaking down the polymer chains that make it, we can reform them at a molecular level and essentially remake new plastics from scratch as if from crude oil. This technology is nothing new, but the context in which I plan to utilize it is. This 2019 survey shows the high rates of community involvement in Australia, especially in social groups. There's been a bit of a decline in percentage over the last 15 years. However, when the growth of the population is taken into account over this time, the actual numbers stay fairly consistent at over 12 million. When specifically volunteer work is looked at in more detail, a workforce of more than 7 million people across the country can be found that are willing to give up their time on a regular basis for someone else's benefit or a cause that they believe in. That's a huge amount of effort and goodwill, which highlights how much our society values a sense of community. That's exactly this framework that I hope to tap into. I only need to gain traction with a fraction of this population. The ones who are concerned about the environment, but also actively engaged, who find value in helping others and improving the world around them. They are the first adopters. Whether they're council workers, CEOs, tradies, or stay-at-home parents, it doesn't really matter. They are the ones who will put the effort in their own way, to educate themselves about this new system and utilise it to spread lasting change throughout their local city and suburban coastal communities. It's in these areas that the most change can be effected. Containing the highest densities of both population and plastic waste, it's where the story needs to begin. Although that's not where it has to end. Remote communities can also benefit from the chemical recycling of plastic waste. This is Balgo Hills, a small Aboriginal community in WA. I used to live right here. Every weekend for a year, I would go around town picking up everyone's bins, stacking them onto a big trailer and drive them 2 kilometres down the road to the tip, where I would dump everything into a hole and set it on fire. Packaging, old clothes, furniture, electronics, whatever. A massive waste of resources, but with literally no other option, it's what has to be done to avoid a hazardous buildup of waste material. A chemical recycling system here would grant people with the ability to create cheap fuel for electricity and transport, or even create a microeconomy, whilst completely eradicating plastic waste in the area. The current leading chemical recyclers, of which there aren't many, are all heavily invested in the large scale. They're big companies, so they need to make money, so they scale up. It's not that the technology doesn't work at small scales, it's that it's just not profitable enough for them, which effectively levels the field of direct competitors to a surprising zero. Chemical recycling systems that are in operation outside an industrial scale just don't exist. There's absolutely no one. This system represents a whole new untapped market. The potential growth is unparalleled. We are in dire need of this technology everywhere, and no one has any plans to implement it quite like this. Now for the design, I kept the community environment in mind, and began developing ideas for forms that the system could potentially take. Many taking on the size of a small sedan, with a few outlier exceptions. The ideation helped me to consider the user interaction on a deeper level. From this, 3 distinct concepts emerged, each with their own theme. The first, a smaller system designed to be installed in a school, where the educational aspects could take precedence, also incorporating a plastic shredder as a separate body with a similar form. The next, a slightly larger system designed to be installed in a community group like a lifesaving club, that could promote local initiatives like beach cleans, and would give the collected litter a second life. The last, a much larger system designed to be used by a plastic part manufacturing facility to reduce its plastic waste to zero, by recycling every manufacturing mistake and broken part back into brand new plastic. It was decided that the chosen concept would need to promote safety more than anything, due to the inherent dangers when working with high temperatures. A range of features in line with the goals of the project meant that Concept 2 was chosen, community engagement, safety and simplicity being the overriding factors. The next stage of development shows a simplification of the exterior forms from the initial ideation. Drawers for depositing of waste material feature heavily in this stage, as do large screens allowing the delivery of educational material. The drawers remained a focus, so a mechanism for emptying their contents into larger bins behind the wall was developed. Basically, a set of pins that extrude from the drawer's base, follow tracks in the wall, and peel away the segmented bottom, allowing the rubbish to fall down. With user experience being of utmost importance to assure the continued use of the system over the long term, a concept was developed for the touchscreen interface that would control it. It would work in conjunction with a range of sensors, allowing the user to monitor the status of the entire system at a glance. The form was further developed with a focus on simplicity, and new features added, like a whole body opening mechanism. This feature not only brings the system into the future stylistically, but also keeps the technology secure when it's not in use, helping to avoid unwanted tampering and vandalism. Utilising a minimalistic white facade and a softly rounded form, I designed this system for a wide range of applications, stylistically as well as technologically. I believe this is the next frontier in materials science, and it would mark an important step in creating a truly circular economy that we can continue to hand down to the generations of tomorrow. We need to redefine recycling and reconnect it to its original meaning. We only have one planet. Let's use it right, so we can continue to reuse it.